Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Board Gaming Doctor. My name is Phil, and I'll be your Board Game Doctor today. In this video, I'm going to break down my first impressions of Clash of Cultures, the Monumental edition, published in 2021, designed by Christian Markussen. This review was brought to you in part by you. A lot of you participated in the polls that I posted about a month ago, helping me decide which board game to prioritize and play and review next, and so thank you for your input and participation if you did so. Clash of Cultures, and specifically the Monumental Edition, is a 4X civilization game featuring classic elements like map, exploration, resource collection, city building, building wonders, unit development, and combat. Points are scored at the end based off of cards that you play as well as pieces that you put onto the board, giving it a little bit more of a Euro game feel with the 4X style mechanisms, but there are some unique features to this game that make it stand out. First, the tech tree. The game offers a diverse tech tree ranging from agriculture to government. Your choices influence your settlements and overall strategy, which also enhances replayability through varied tech paths that can synergize with player abilities and board situations. Speaking of which, you do start the game with an asymmetric culture of your own, and each culture or civilization starts with 4 unique technologies that you can develop into, guiding early gameplay if necessary. The expansion introduces leader units with ongoing abilities if built and recruited, similar to how commanders work in Magic the Gathering. Leaders provide tactical advantages, but can be lost in combat. Unfortunately, if you were to recruit another leader, you can do so with a completely different and asymmetric leader apart from the first one that you had recruited. Next, the mechanism of culture influence. Players can spend culture points and roll dice to quote-unquote take over opponents' cities, replacing their parts with their own. This mechanism smartly, in my opinion, represents cultural assimilation without the need for violence, which of course is a part of this game, but you can add points to your own score by assimilating other opponents' settlements and city pieces, but they do get to keep the additional benefits that did come with that piece for their own culture. So while they continue to benefit from that city piece, ultimately you, who have influenced that piece, will score for it at the end of the game. Speaking of the end of the game can end after 6 ages typically, which equates to 54 actions per player taken throughout the game. But you can make the game varied and end the game earlier through various triggers like dice rolling or building a wonder in the last 5 rounds, or you can allow for customization based off of the group and situation, such as no event cards or playing with certain event cards, etc. So those were some of the mechanisms that stood out to me, but let's compare this game to others. The first game that comes to mind, and that is very recent for me, is Epochs by Jeffrey CCH. Both games offer a 4X experience in 2 to 3 hours, with mechanisms that are very similar, and I'll go into more detail later. But in particular, thinking about the individual mechanisms in Clash of Cultures, the dice-based combat and retreating mechanism involved with that is reminiscent of Risk. Other similarities include the random elements, such as random events that happen when you advance, random alternate endings if you choose to play so. It kind of reminded me of the random harvests in Caverna, where if you do play the game with that, you flip over a harvest tile randomly and you must be prepared at all times in case the game does end in Clash of Cultures or if a harvest happens in Caverna. And so there is a little bit of tension that is involved with that sort of randomness to when certain things happen in the game. The multi-use cards aspect of this game, where you have objective cards in Clash of Cultures with multiple uses either in combat or otherwise, in addition to the event cards, was kind of reminiscent of Scythe for me. And the action chaining, meaning on your turn you have 3 actions that you take in a row, creating an opportunity to chain together a couple of actions to accomplish what you want to do, was very reminiscent of the action selection mechanisms in Through the Ages, with the action cubes dictating how many actions you can take and what kind of actions you can do as well. Then finally, the cultural influence mechanism, once again, like I mentioned in my review of Epochs, felt drawn from the experience that I've had playing Age of Empires on the PC many years ago, where the priests and the temples, you could create units that could convert and change opponents to your side during battle or otherwise. And I thought that was a really fun mechanism. I don't know if it was strong or weak or not. But on the tabletop experience, I felt the same way with the wolves. The comparison being that with the influence mechanism in Clash of Cultures, you have to be wary about where you place your units and your settlements and cities. If they're too close to someone else and they are accumulating culture points, you may be at risk for losing that piece to them. Whereas in the Wolves game, it is an abstracted area control or / majority kind of game where you can lose your pieces to other opponents if they have enough wolves and an alpha wolf close by and use that influence action on your own. And so you can potentially lose them and have to be paying attention to where everyone is at the time. And so it creates a lot of tension and forward planning that needs to happen from turn to turn. And so that's what I like about both of those games, and particularly in Clash of Cultures. Moving on to the peer review, players appreciate and praise the game for its shorter playtime compared to classic Civ games. They really enjoy the diverse technology paths that you can take in this game, offering replayability based off of what could be synergistic with the cultures that you are using, as well as in general, and offering an opportunity to explore a different part of the game and how it interacts with the technology tracks. The fact that you can win in multiple ways, not just by military dominance, is also another factor that people like about this game, once again harkening back to its more Euro-style mechanisms and ways to score points at the end of the game. You can win this game by building out your own collection of cities and not having to participate in military at all. And so some people like that. The components are well done, especially in this Monumental edition, and the rulebook, while long, is well written and intuitive, and so people really enjoy that to help them learn the game. But some people do mention some concerns. The game is very reliant on dice for combat and cultural influence, as well as other things, and so obviously that introduces some luck into the game, potentially reducing the fun that this game provides, especially since it is a longer game in terms of what a Euro-style game typically is, and even though this game is comparatively shorter to the classic Civilization games. But all in all, most people had good things to say about this on Board Game Geek, with the only downsides being the fact that it is long for the amount of luck that potentially is involved. Now, all of this could be mitigated by the way that you play the game, the way that you set yourself up before you roll the dice, but still, things could hinge on a dice roll that you may not want it to. Other people who have played it extensively as well said that the strategy may become a little bit more rote over time, and that is the case with games that have a pretty static setup as far as, say, the tech tree is concerned, with the only variability coming from the modular map as well as the civilizations that you start with. But that kind of goes into my first impressions of this game and what I thought of it. First of all, learning the game was a little challenging because of how extensive the rules are and the length of the rulebook itself, but I do agree with those who praise it. It was well written and easy to learn from. It just took a while to learn the game in general, and I was referring to the rulebook many times during my learning play. When it does come down to the strategy, though, and mostly for the Euro mechanisms of the game, where it does come down to more points to win the game, I did feel like there is potentially a strong and tried and true strategy that is more beneficial, meaning the tech tree and the way that you advance on it. There probably is a strong strategy and most efficient strategy that is present there. I have not taken a look at the strategy forum in Board Game Geek for this game, but perhaps someone has quote-unquote solved the correct way to advance on your tech track. But that doesn't mean that it's a bad game, because I compare that kind of strategy where it's mostly static at setup and feels more chess-like to games that I really enjoy, like A Feast for Odin and Fields of Arla. Those games by Rosenberg are very much static, and everything is kind of laid out on the table in front of you. Nothing is too random in the game, aside from, small minor setup variabilities and cards and things like that. But for the most part, you can kind of go into it knowing what strategy you want to do, and there is very little during the game that may alter your course. In Clash of Cultures, obviously you do have objective cards and the events and the wonders that pop up that are random, and including the dice rolls as well. I think there is enough variability, and it would really depend on how strong those objective cards and event cards are in altering your play strategy during the game to move you in a different direction than is potentially the most efficient if those were removed and you were just playing with the tech track and the modular board. But all of that to say, it was still really enjoyable to play, and the sense of discovery and exploration into what the different parts of the tech tree have to offer during the game is really intriguing, and is something that I would want to come back to over and over again, at least at the very minimum amount of plays and experience that I have with this game. Now, to compare it to Epochs, which is a recent Kickstarter release of a 4X Euro style game, type of a hybrid of a Euro and American style game, which, you know, these old Civilization games are more American style games where they're very lengthy and have a lot of different ways to score, well, not points, but to win and beat your opponents. Both games accomplish mechanically a lot of the same things that you would expect from a 4X, with exploration and resource gathering, etc. The minor differences that perhaps set each game apart would be in Epochs you have mostly a card-based strategy that you are following. You do have a list of standard actions that you can take, but in each epoch you have cards that you can play from your hand, and up to half of your actions can be from these cards, which give you some resources as well as some efficiencies to do things better. And there's a market of cards that you can buy from, in addition to the central board that you are placing units on and buildings on. You can trade with other people as well. All of that is very similar to what you can see in Clash of Cultures, with I think the main difference being that action selection mechanism, mainly driven by cards and epochs, versus a list of actions, standard actions that you can take in Clash of Cultures. But some of those actions do feel a little bit more unique, including the influence culture and being able to swap your pieces with other opponents' pieces that they have played on the board already, altering the way that it is scored at the end of the game. I do feel like there is more to do in Clash of Cultures compared to Epochs as well. More units and buildings that you can build onto your part of the board, and so I think there is more to discover and explore in Clash of Cultures if you were to talk about content when compared to Epochs. But I think Epochs would feel more familiar to folks who have either played Jeffrey CCH's games before, like Age of Civilization, or are more familiar with Euro-style mechanisms. It may feel a little bit more comfortable to those players, such as myself. I, thanks to Epochs, had a little bit of an idea of how things might have worked in Clash of Cultures, but it did include a steeper learning curve for me, who is more used to the Euro-style mechanisms in board games. But both games are very excellent. They accomplish a lot of the same things. They may tailor to your likes in different ways. Perhaps for example, the theme in Clash of Cultures is strictly more medieval and ancient times, whereas in Epochs you do have a progression through the older, old to the new times to modern times, with some of the civilizations that you can play asymmetrically, reflecting some more modern civilizations as well, such as London and potentially America. And so if that kind of fits your tastes better, if you want to play a history type of game that includes more of a modern feel, then Epochs might be right for you. But if you don't mind it being more ancient and medieval, then you would probably like Clash of Cultures just as well. But I really enjoyed it and hope to play it some more. So those are my first thoughts and impressions on Clash of Cultures, the Monumental Edition. Once again, thank you for everyone who participated in the poll, whether it was on YouTube or on Board Game Geek, to help me decide to play this game this month. And I'll try to get to some more games as soon as I can. And thank you for consulting with me, and hope that you schedule an appointment with us real soon. Take care.